Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of BTTH Rebirth of Emperor Yang episode number 180 based on novel. So let's start. In the void, Han Dong put the specially made president of the herbalist in the air. His mind moved. In his eyebrows, the huge soul power immediately poured out like a tide. When the terrible soul power of the 5th level herbalist poured out, it caused a violent agitation in the surrounding void, and the terrible pressure made several people present dignified. Although Han Dong's cultivation is not as good as the four of them, he can easily suppress any of them except Chen Zhen by virtue of the terrible soul power of the 5th level herbalist. The invisible soul force surges like a raging wave. The invisible void is violently distorted under this soul force, as if it has reached the edge of collapse. It seems that as long as there is another small action, this large void will collapse in an instant. Aware of the strength of this soul power, Rao was shocked by Xiao Yang's nature and the bottom of his heart. In his eyes, the pupil could not help shrinking to the size of a needle. He is worthy of being a 5th level herbalist. Such a powerful soul power can really be called such a terror. His throat rolled slightly, and Xiao Yang couldn't help feeling frightened at the bottom of his heart. At this time, the old man also stretched out 2 dry fingers like bamboo knots. When his heart moved, the vigorous soul power immediately gathered at the old man's fingertips. However, in a blink of an eye, the invisible soul power gradually solidified into a sharp awl, just like the essence. Han Dong concentrated on controlling the awl on his fingertip and stopped at a position only an inch away from the herbalist's badge. Then he turned his eyes and looked at Xiao Yang again and asked, "Xiao Yang, according to the rules of the Herbalist Alliance, this badge needs to be engraved with the exclusive word seal of the herbalist. Please choose a word."
Oh.
Hearing the speech, Xiao Yang couldn't help picking his eyebrows. When his eyes turned, he remembered that he hesitated a little. Xiao Yang arched his hands at the old man in front of him and said respectfully, "Then please ask the vice president to engrave the word inflammation for the younger generation." Xiao Yang himself is a herbalist and bears different fire. His name is connected with the word fire. Naturally, it is best to engrave the word Yang on the herbalist badge. Well, good. Han Dong nodded. Immediately, 2 fingers controlled the almost solidified awl and engraved it on the pharmacist's badge. Just a moment later, the old man handed Xiao Yang the herbalist badge. Looking at the vigorous and powerful word Yang engraved on the badge, Xiao Yang couldn't help smiling. From now on, he has officially joined the Herbalist Alliance. Unlike ordinary people, those invited naturally have a higher status in the Herbalist Alliance than those who apply to join. Moreover, because of the relationship between the invitees, these people often get more and better benefits in the Refining Alliance, which is also one of the purposes of many people who want to enter the Refining Alliance. Holding the badge in his hand, Xiao Yang looked at the 4 people opposite with a smile. From the moment, the faces of the 4 people are all distorted and red. They stare at Xiao Yang with their eyes. If they can kill, I'm afraid Xiao Yang has died thousands of times. For lords, do you have anything else? Han Dong also looked back and smiled at the 4 people. If Xiao Yang was alone in the past, but now he has joined the Herbalist Alliance, Han Dong has reason to fight for him. Although these 4 people are in an extraordinary position, if they want to fight with the people of his Herbalist Alliance, they should also consider it carefully. At present, the existence of Han Dong is a great threat to them. At the moment, it is certain that they can't take Xiao Yang today, let alone kill him. Do you just turn back and leave with an earthy face? The 4 people thought of this in their hearts, and they were particularly unwilling. The feeling of cooked ducks flying away from their mouths was the most annoying. If it's all right, we'll leave first and say goodbye. Seeing that the 4 people in front of him didn't move, Han Dong immediately smiled and looked at Xiao Yang. The latter also smiled and nodded. They started together and wanted to leave. Wait a minute. Just as Xiao Yang turned around and wanted to leave, there was a deep voice behind him. Suddenly, they looked at each other, frowned and took a deep breath. Then they turned around and looked at the 4 people behind them. "Do you have anything else to do?" Han Dong looked a little gloomy on his old face, and his tone was a little impatient. President Han. Chen Zhen stepped forward, his eyes narrowed, and his eyes stared at the two people in front of him. At this critical moment, the person who spoke was still Chen Zhen. As the leader of the four major doors, only when he stood up first could he make the three guys around him mention their thoughts. Seeing Chen Zhen's opening, several people in the void also looked at the latter. Xiao Yang also frowned slightly. I don't know what this guy is still thinking. Now that Xiao Yang has joined the alliance of herbalists, if we attack him again, it will be our ignorance. But you should also know how much human and financial resources our four main gates have spent for Tianjue ancient tomb. If you hadn't come forward today, Xiao Yang and Tianjue step would be in our bag. So what do you want to say? Han Dong's eyes narrowed and his voice sounded a little low. Hearing the speech, the latter was also slightly absorbed and clenched his teeth. Then he continued. Now that Xiao Yang is a member of the Herbalist Alliance, we can stop investigating him, but... At this point, Chen Zhen paused, his eyes turned and fixed on Xiao Yang. The essence light in the depths of his eyes flickered. The three people around him seemed to understand something, and they all turned their eyes to Xiao Yang. If Xiao Yang can give us Tianjuebu, we can let bygones be bygones and never be enemies with him again. As soon as he said this, Xiao Yang's face immediately became gloomy. Han Dong on one side could not help frowning. If you don't want to, President Han, today, our four major doors can only offend. Before Xiao Yang could speak, Chen Zhen looked cold, and the breath in his body gushed out at this moment. For a while, a powerful momentum spread around him. In the sky, the four main sect leaders each released their powerful momentum and pressure, and their vigorous fighting spirit rushed out of their bodies, straight into the sky and turned into four fighting light pillars. They sank into the 9 days, and their momentum was like a rainbow. The momentum of the four people combined with each other on this void, became stronger, and pressed down hard towards Han Dong and Xiao Yang. Although it was not a fatal attack, it was also thrilling with the terrible power of this momentum. Seeing this scene, Han Dong suddenly snorted coldly and read it in his heart. The powerful soul power in the center of his eyebrows broke out, like a long gun, with a vast momentum, which forcibly resisted the authority of the four people. Do the four patriarchs really want to fight with our Herbalist Alliance? Although he resisted the imposing force of the four high-ranking fighting emperors with his own strength, Han Dong's face was not good-looking. It was really too reluctantly to move to 4. President Han, our four main doors have made concessions again and again because of the face of you and the Herbalist Alliance. Now we just hope to get Tianjueba and open Tianjueba ancient tomb. It doesn't seem difficult. As long as Xiao Yang is willing to hand over Tianjueba, our four main doors will turn around and leave immediately, but if we don't hand it in, let's go back with such a disheartened face. How can we tell the Pope? Explain? As the sect leader, do you still need to explain to the sect? Han Dong sneered. What Chen Zhen said is bullshit. The leader of the sect needs to report what he does to the sect. In that case, President Han, you can only offend. No matter what today, Xiao Yang must hand over Tianjue step. Then, Chen Zhen gave a loud shout, and his eyes quickly met with the three people around him. Immediately, he nodded heavily. As soon as his body shook, the fighting spirit in the cyclone in his body poured out more fiercely. After a few breaths, Han Dong's soul was oppressed by the joint efforts of the four people. Under the joint efforts of the four high-level fighting emperors and strong men, the momentum and pressure condensed out is not something Han Dong can easily resist. Buzz. At this time, Xiao Yang, who has been silent, suddenly has an action. I saw a dark white flame light column from Xiao Yang, and the amazing momentum swept outward from his body. At the same time, a slightly illusory huge figure also stood up quickly behind Xiao Yang. The powerful force, coupled with Han Dong's soul threat, pushed up the momentum gathered by the four people in an instant. Then, just as the faces of the four people changed slightly, there was another powerful soul pressure, which erupted from Xiao Yang's body and went straight up. Just listen to a bang. In the world, the momentum pressure formed by the joint efforts of four high-ranking fighting emperors and powerful people was forcibly broken by Xiao Yang and Han Dong. What? In the sky, including Han Dong, 5 people's faces appeared a color of shock. Several people looked at Xiao Yang with shocked eyes, and their emotions could not be expressed in words. Relying on the strength of the 5-star fighting emperor and combined with Han Dong's soul pressure, they actually blocked the momentum of these 4 people. I'm afraid no one in the world can do this. But just when they were shocked, Xiao Yang looked at them coldly. As soon as his wrist turned, there was a flash of light in the palm of his hand. Soon, a scroll appeared in Xiao Yang's hand. For patriarchs, Tianjueba is in my hand now. If you have the ability, come forward and take it. Xiao Yang clenched the scroll with his palm and lifted it over his head. His eyes were cold and swept over the 4 people around him. The words in his mouth made them immediately recall. The moment when the 4 eyes were full of hot color was set on the scroll held high in Xiao Yang's hands. Tianjue step. Xiao Yang, hand over Tianjuebu quickly. If you want to live, hand over Tianjuebu first. In the sky, 4 people stared at the scroll in Xiao Yang's hand with bright eyes. They waited for this day for too long. Finally, now Tianjueba finally appeared in front of them. As long as Tianjue steps in hand, at that time, they can not only open Tianjue ancient tomb, but also greatly improve their combat power with the help of the magic of Tianjue step. They can also jump into the first of the 4 main doors and crush the other 3 main doors, which makes them calm. With this in mind, the 4 immediately couldn't wait to come forward and take Tianjue step from Xiao Yang's hand. But the next moment, Xiao Yang's face suddenly turned cold. At the same time, his palm clutching the scroll was even harder. His eyes swept quickly from the 4 people, and then shouted, "If you dare to come forward again, I will destroy Tianjue step immediately." Said, Xiao Yang's arm shook, and the scroll in his hand shook several times. The 4 people around looked surprised, and hurriedly stepped back excitedly. At the same time, he also kept persuading Xiao Yang not to destroy Tianjueba. Seeing this, Xiao Yang sneered in his heart. He was just scaring them. These people actually had such a big reaction. It seems that they are really worried about this day. It's true that such rebellious body fighting skills, not to mention them, I'm afraid they will not calm down if they let anyone go. Xiao Yang, as long as you can hand over Tianjueben, we can discuss everything. As long as you hand over Tianjueben, we cannot mention anything that happened before. Oh. Smell speech, Xiao Yang is full of sarcastic sneer. They say they don't mention it, but how can Xiao Yang easily let them go? After all these years, both of them have been in a state of immortality. Now it's too cold to say that they don't mention it at all. The 4 patriarchs don't have to bother anymore. I will never hand it over. As soon as their eyes stagnated, their killing intention rose again. But I can give you a choice. For their murderous eyes, Xiao Yang directly chose to ignore them and continued. 1 year later, I will go to the entrance of Tianjue ancient tomb. If you can be there, I can join hands with you to open the entrance of the ancient tomb. Otherwise, you can choose to take nothing today and get nothing a year later. Are you threatening us? Didn't you want to threaten us just now? Xiao Yang sneered back. Suddenly, the 4 people didn't dare to move anymore. Seeing that Tianjue step was close at hand, they couldn't get it. The 4 people were so angry that their teeth itched. The 4 people were silent for a long time. After talking to each other, they finally nodded helplessly. Well, we'll see you outside Tianjue ancient tomb in a year. Seeing the 4 nodded, Xiao Yang was relieved. He smiled and looked at Han Dong. They looked at each other and wanted to turn around and leave. Wait. But then the impatient voice came again. Hearing this, Xiao Yang turned around again with a gloomy face. Xiao Yang's extremely cold eyes fell directly on Chen Zhen. He was very disgusted with this guy's voice. We can promise to see you outside Tianjue ancient tomb in a year, but can you promise that you will go there? What do you want? Xiao Yang's face was gloomy and his tone was very impatient. Make a thunder punishment oath. As soon as they said this, the 3 people around them also looked at Xiao Yang. Chen Zhen's concern is not unreasonable. Only when Xiao Yang made a thunder punishment oath, can they really believe the latter's words. Hee, okay, come and don't be rude. Let's make a thunder punishment oath together, shall we? In the end, Xiao Yang grinned. There was a funny smile in his smile. At the smell of the speech, The four people opposite could not help but frown slightly, but finally he took a deep breath and said, "Okay. For patriarchs, since I want to make a thunder punishment oath, I should be able to ask you a little." Xiao Yang grinned and raised the scroll in his hand. Although this sounds like a discussion, in fact, the meaning is very clear in the hearts of the people present. Hearing Xiao Yang's words, the four of Chen Array couldn't help lowering their faces, but after their eyes swept over Chenjua's step, they finally had to sigh helplessly and say in a deep voice, "You say, as long as it's not too much, I can promise you. Hehe, my request is not difficult for you four, and it can be said to be simple." Xiao Yang smiled and continued, "My request is very simple. 1 year later, after we enter Chenjua ancient tomb, you can't do anything to me." As soon as the words came out, the four people in front of them couldn't bear to frown. The already gloomy look on their faces changed again. It seems that the four don't want to. As soon as his face was cold, Xiao Yang's palm holding the scroll was more forceful, his 5 fingers tightened, and the creaking friction sound was also transmitted to the four people's ears. Immediately, the four people of Chen Array tightened their hearts, clenched their teeth, and quickly promised, "Okay, we'll just follow you." Now Tianjuabu is in Xiao Yang's hands. Even if they are reluctant at the moment, in order to have a chance to get Tianjuabu, the four can only promise Xiao Yang's requirements again and again. According to Xiao Yang's meaning, the four made thunder punishment vows respectively. After that, this is Xiao Yang. With the Tianjua step in his hand, Xiao Yang makes them throw away the mouse and dare not act rashly for the time being. He doesn't put forward any requirements, which is also within Xiao Yang's expectation. After making the thunder punishment oath, the four of Chen Array felt relieved. Although they didn't catch Xiao Yang and didn't get Tianjua step, now they have at least hope. After only 1 year, Tianjua ancient tomb can finally be opened. At that time, the treasures in the ancient tomb will be used by his 4 major gates. At that time, the status of the 4 major gates in the western regions, and will rise again. The western regions will really become their world. "Well, for lords, now, can we leave?" After a long time, Han Dong spoke again, and this time, the four of Chen Array finally stopped pestering. Before Xiao Yang left, they turned first and walked in the direction of coming. Until the bodies of the four people completely disappeared within the scope of Han Dong's perception, the latter turned around and looked at Xiao Yang with a kind smile. "Hihi, you are also a brave person. You can drive these 4 people back. Looking at the western regions, you are the first person I have seen." The old man's eyes swept over Xiao Yang, and he couldn't help exclaiming. The admiration in his tone was not concealed at all. The elder is joking. The younger generation is just relying on Tianjua step to make them throw away the mouse and dare not act rashly. With the greed of these guys, if Tianjua step is not enough to make them really excited, they would have done it just now. "Ha ha, you are too modest. The one who can laugh last is the winner. In terms of today's affairs, if you can force them back, you have won." Han Dong stroked his beard lightly, but Xiao Yang shook his head with a light smile. He looked at the direction of the 4 people's departure in the distance and frowned in meditation. Although Chen Zhen and his party left here for the time being, Xiao Yang believed that they would never give up, especially Yi Luotian, who hid the deepest among the 4 main gates. Everyone thought he was just a 7-star fighting emperor. But once he really showed his strength, I'm afraid it would be the end of the other 3 main gates at that time. But now, Xiao Yang doesn't know whether Yi Luotian will come alone. I believe that with that guy's heart, he won't care whether Tianjuaba can remain complete. Moreover, when facing Yi Luotian, Xiao Yang can always feel a strange smell from him. That smell gives Xiao Yang a quite familiar feeling, but he can't remember when he met. I'm afraid Yi Luotian is not an ordinary person. His identity is not just one of the 4 main doors. It's a pity that Xiao Yang can't find any information about this. At present, Xiao Yang can only look at it step by step. If he can't avoid the coming storm, he can only accept it head-on. Growing up in the storm, isn't Xiao Yang always like this? "Hehe, Xiao Yang, now that they have left, I should go. I really came out to do some things, but I didn't expect to meet Xiao Yang by chance. Now that things are solved, I should leave." At this time, Handong turned his voice, and a pair of turbid old eyes looked at Xiao Yang again. Hearing this, Xiao Yang couldn't help but be stunned. He immediately nodded again, arched his hands and hugged the old man, and said respectfully, "Thank you for your help today. If there is another day, I will give it back. You're welcome, little friend. I did it to invite you to join our alliance of herbalists. Since I'm a member of the alliance of herbalists, I don't have a reason not to do it when I see you in trouble. By the way, the headquarters of our herbalist alliance is established in the Western Wasteland. If you encounter any difficulties on this trip, you can go to the herbalist alliance. As long as you take out your herbalist badge, someone will naturally help you." After that, Handong seemed to think of something and said a word to Xiao Yang. "Oh." Hearing Handong's words, Xiao Yang couldn't help picking his eyebrows. Unexpectedly, the headquarters of the Alliance of Herbalists would be established in the Western Wasteland. But then Xiao Yang returned to his senses, nodded to Handong with gratitude, arched his hands and hugged his fist again, and said respectfully, "Thank you for reminding me." Smelling the speech, the latter also stroked his beard with one hand, smiled peacefully and nodded. Then, the old man smiled and gave more instructions to Xiao Yang, and then turned around and flew away in another direction. In the twinkling of an eye, Xiao Yang was the only one left on such a big sky. "Who?" A long breath came out, but the heavy stone pressed on Xiao Yang's heart still didn't put it down. On the contrary, Xiao Yang felt more heavy with Handong's departure. He vaguely sensed that his trip to the Western Wasteland would not be as smooth as he imagined, gently shook his head and threw his thoughts behind his head. Xiao Yang moved and fell into the city below again. With the dispersion of those people in the sky, those curious eyes in the lower city gradually retracted. For all this, everyone seems to be surprised, just like watching a boring play. However, just when all this seemed to have ended, thousands of miles away from the southeast of Shahepu, Chen Zhan and others dispersed separately. An hour later, Yi Luotian's figure appeared on a mountain peak. At the moment, here, a dark shadow was standing on the top of the cliff. Looking at the figure flying from the sky from a distance, he made a strange cry. It seemed that he was impatient with the latter's lateness. Xiao Yang stayed in Shahepu for only one day. After buying a detailed map of the Western Wasteland, he set foot on the journey again. In the vast desert, the wind and sand are raging. The figure in black robes is walking forward in the strong wind. Each step will be deeply immersed in quicksand. With the passing of the figure, behind him is a row of circular pits. If someone is not in front, no one can recognize that it would be footprints. No matter how far they go, those footprints are gradually buried in the quicksand, the shadows are gradually moving away, and the traces of walking also disappear, as if there had never been anyone here. After leaving Shahepu, Xiao Yang stepped into the vast desert. He did not choose to fly through directly, but walked slowly towards the depths of the desert. In Xiao Yang's words, walking itself is also a way of cultivation. What's more, although his cultivation has reached the middle of the 5-star fighting emperor, his strength is not as stable as before under the rapid improvement. If he blindly improves his cultivation level and forgets his foundation, sooner or later, Xiao Yang will disappear from the public. Xiao Yang clearly knew that the reason why he was able to surpass the strong at the same level was that he was down to earth and came step by step. Just like on the yellow sand, every step of his landing will leave a depression. The depth of the depression will change with the solidifying degree of the sand under his feet, but when Xiao Yang passes by, those pits will return to their original appearance. Although the face is restored, if you step on it again, you will find that the foothold is much more solid, just like stepping on the ground, especially stable. But if you fly through it directly, although you can reach the destination earlier, the yellow sand below is still loose. If you step on it one day, no one knows what the quicksand will become. I can't say, it will sink him deeply. On the contrary, Xiao Yang is different. After walking the road before, when she goes back and forth again, this road will only bring him surprise and convenience. Although the completion of this road may be much harder and slower than others, he has also received much more than others. There is never any shortcut in this world. Others' achievements seem brilliant, but who knows how much he has paid under that brilliant brilliance. The endless journey seems to have no end all day. This road seems to have no edge and no hope. If ordinary people are in such a hot environment and this boundless desert, they may not be able to walk for a day. However, in such a severe environment, Xiao Yan actually took off all his precautions. With only his black robe and the oncoming strong wind on his head, he put away the raging fire in his body. In other words, Xiao Yan was almost completely exposed in the desert at this time. Now Xiao Yan can say nothing except his flesh and blood. At least, before he used his strength, he was no different from an ordinary person. In this case, he was a fighter and had the ability to kill him. The black robe was blown by the wind and flew in the air, just like a black flag. Under the black robe was Xiao Yang's naked upper body. His white skin was exposed to the air. For a while, the hot temperature beat on Xiao Yang's body like a flame, sending a burst of hot pain to Xiao Yang. The oncoming vigorous wind was not as gentle as expected. It not only didn't bring the slightest pleasant feeling, but also the hot temperature around Xiao Yang became more terrible. The hard sand and gravel, in the vigorous wind, became like red steel nails one by one, and hit Xiao Yang's body heavily. You can even clearly see that the moment those sand and gravel hit Xiao Yang's body, leaving clear depressions one by one. At first, Xiao Yang's whole body was quickly soaked by sweat, but in the end, Xiao Yang couldn't even flow a drop of sweat. His lips were pale and chapped, his skin and flesh turned out, his red blood gushed out, and the fishy and sweet smell poured into his lungs with Xiao Yang's breath, making him dry and dumb swallow. Under such a ruthless blow, RAO, with Xiao Yang's physical strength and on the surface of his skin, unexpectedly, there are a large number of dense red spots. The scarlet blood flows under his skin. Xiao Yang clenches his teeth and bears the pain hard. Until a certain moment, the red blood scattered from Xiao Yang's body and quickly condensed into a thin blood scab. The gravel first knocked on those wounds and joined the blood. Then, the blood condensed together. In a twinkling of an eye, Xiao Yang's whole upper body turned dark red. The thin blood scab seemed to put a tight suit on Xiao Yang. The gravel blew on the blood scab, and there was a fine crash sound. The hot high temperature burned the thin blood scab like iron. Under the blood scab, Xiao Yang frowned, and the blood scab on his forehead suddenly broke and fell, falling into the yellow sand like a porcelain piece, and was quickly submerged. Boom! Suddenly, the forest white flame soared on Xiao Yang's body surface and quickly cleaned up the high temperature around Xiao Yang's body. The latter's body was finally relaxed at this moment. Xiao Yang relaxed his body, but he didn't dare to rest more. He quickly controlled his body and forced himself to sit down. His mind moved, and the burning determination skill in his body began to work. Between heaven and earth, hot energy also converged towards anti-inflammatory. At this moment, 2 hours have passed since Xiao Yangchu entered the desert. Although there were only 2 hours, during this period, Xiao Yang tasted great pain. On the premise of not using any force to resist, relying on his flesh and blood, Xiao Yang admitted that he could never survive here. For ordinary people, it was purgatory. But because of this, it is a great place for Xiao Yang to cultivate his physical strength. In this environment, ordinary flesh and blood can't adapt at all, but just for the first time, Xiao Yang insisted for 2 hours and insisted repeatedly. As long as the time is longer than once, the toughness of Xiao Yang's body can be greatly enhanced, which is of great help to practical combat. It's just a pity that for 2 hours, relying on his flesh and blood alone in the desert, Xiao Yang has almost reached his limit and has to rest temporarily. He can only wait until he recovers to the peak and then move on. In the western wasteland, the yellow sand is raging, the vigorous wind is howling, and the sand is like rain. Looking around, there is even no cloud on the boundless sky. Only the hot sun like a fireball emits unbearable terrible high temperature. Between heaven and earth, it was hot and dry. There was no water in the air. There was no other color in the long yellow sand. The fine quicksand became as hot as charcoal under the scorching sun. Here, it was a Jedi. In the vast desert, Xiao Yang in black robes walked slowly to the west, with heavy and steady steps. Since leaving Shahapao, Xiao Yang has been walking in the desert for 7 days. In 7 days, Xiao Yang will spend several hours every day to harden his flesh. Although the process is painful, It has to be said that under such repeated hardening, Xiao Yang's flesh strength has also been rapidly improved. Moreover, after repeated cultivation, the fighting spirit in Xiao Yang's body is also solidifying rapidly. The pure fighting spirit became more pure and broken under the condensation of different fire. A fist-sized fighting spirit finally became a thumb-sized pure energy droplet after the refining of different fire and merged into the cyclone space in Xiao Yang's body. Under such repeated and slow refinement, Xiao Yang's cultivation gradually stabilized. After 7 days of purgatory-like destruction, Xiao Yang's flesh became dark. He didn't know how many layers of skin had fallen off his body. Xiao Yang only knew that he was bleeding all the way. At the moment when the red blood gushed out, it quickly condensed into a layer of blood scab, and then it quickly chapped and fell, then it gushed out, chapped and fell again and again. Xiao Yang's body was constantly destroyed in such an environment, but compared with that on the first day, Xiao Yang has been able to rely on his physical strength to persist in the desert for most of the day. Although the final result will make Xiao Yang lose all his physical strength and it is difficult to mobilize his fighting spirit, but that's why Xiao Yang's strength, the lifting speed is also more rapid. The so-called flowering in destruction and growing up in difficulties, the demon phoenix into a phoenix still needs to suffer from nirvana. If you want to become a dragon among people, don't you have to bear greater pain than this? Fortunately, Xiao Yang's greatest advantage is perseverance and extraordinary toughness. As long as he wants to do anything, he will not give up. Even if he is in great pain and danger, Xiao Yang is not afraid. He can go to today. Among them, courage accounts for a lot of weight. In the yellow sand, Xiao Yang was sitting in the air with his body. He made practice knots with his hands. His mind moved, and the burning Ju skill in his body immediately began to work. In the cyclone, the pure fighting chi moves rapidly along the path of the burning formula. After a week of operation, it becomes a drop of pure water after refining by different fire and disappears into the cyclone space. This process lasted for 3 hours. When Xiao Yang opened his eyes again, it was almost dusk. However, unlike the Shilin region, in the western wilderness region, even at dusk, the sun was still hot, but it was no longer as hot as noon. However, there was a muggy atmosphere between heaven and earth. Under the protection of different fire, Xiao Yang will not be affected by the bad environment, but now the sky is getting dark, so he should find a place to rest temporarily. The environment in the desert changes very fast. Without fixed road signs, even Xiao Yang can't identify the correct direction. During the day, he can identify the route with the help of the track of the sun, so that his direction won't deviate from the west. However, if there are no direction signs at night, even with a map, it won't help. The map in his hand is really good for the western wasteland, but because of the terrain, Xiao Yang is still at the periphery of the western wasteland. It's a desert. Sand dunes fluctuate. What role can the map play? Ordinary strong people fly across the desert outside the western wasteland in 1 day. Who would be foolish enough to walk like Xiao Yang? Otherwise, with Xiao Yang's strength, they can officially enter the boundary of the western wasteland in only half a day. As night fell, the vast desert also lost the golden light in the day. The original blue sky gradually deepened until it became dark. No star can be seen on the 9 days, no light can be seen on the earth, and the whole world is in the dark like a mystery. Time is not counted here, just like quicksand in the day, drowning all the grievances. In the dark, the two figures are approaching each other at a very fast speed without any movement. If you carefully explore, you can find that not both figures are moving, but one of them is rapidly approaching another person in the dark. In this thick darkness, the figure is like a poisonous snake, hidden in the dark, and the sharp fangs are ready to pierce the man's throat. Thousands of feet, hundreds of feet, tens of feet, until they came near. However, just as the figure was preparing to do it, under the quicksand, suddenly a giant broke through the ground. Hiss! The sand and stone flew and opened around like a sand wave. Therefore, the action of the dark shadow was stopped. At the same time, a big mouth also bit hard at the other sitting figure. Looking at this, it seemed to swallow the latter. When the body of the giant beast was exposed in the dark, it could be seen vaguely that the giant beast seemed to be a python. The beast is usually hidden under the thick yellow sand. Until the prey appears in front of him, he will find a chance to launch a sudden attack on the latter, kill the latter and devour the latter. Today, when he saw Xiao Yan coming to his territory, he naturally regarded the latter as prey. Unfortunately, it chose the wrong target. Bang! When the giant snake fell down and swallowed Xiao Yan's body, Xiao Yan's sitting figure was suddenly fragmented and dispersed quickly. What the beast just swallowed was just a remnant of Xiao Yan. At this time, when the giant snake turned its head, it found that in the dark, a human figure with an invisible shape was standing above its head. Roar! The roaring sound came out. Just when the giant beast was about to move, Xiao Yan clenched his fist with his 5 fingers on his right hand. At the moment when the giant beast looked up at his feet, he hit it with a fist and pierced the noisy head. The terrible force broke the tissue in the giant snake's head in a moment, and even pierced its jaw. The blood full of fishy smell immediately splashed out. At the same time, the life breath of the giant beast also dissipated quickly. Then Xiao Yan took back his palm, but it was not stained with a trace of blood. At the moment when the giant beast's body fell heavily on the sand dune, Xiao Yan suddenly turned his eyes and looked at the void not far from the giant snake. There was a strange black fog churning in the air. For a moment, Xiao Yan's face became gloomy. In a pair of lacquer black eyes, a Mori white flame lit up in an instant. Ghost Hall. This video will end here.